out of my sight!
I'm only returning a binder.
He slammed the binder on the cart.
You think this is a game? This is a disaster! Get it right!
Paige Griffin didn't flinch. She turned, walked away, quiet as a ghost. But that night, alone in the basement at 11:48 p.m., she saw something she was never supposed to see. She saw them swap the papers. 72 hours later, she burst into a billionaire meeting and whispered something that made every man in that room stop breathing. What did she say? Man, they ignored the wrong person. And now, yeah, it's about to get real. Let's get into it. Most people at Sterling and Hale didn't know Paige Griffin existed. That was by design. Her shift started at 10 p.m. It ended at 6 a.m. 8 hours in a basement lit by fluorescent tubes that buzzed like dying insects. Her job was simple. Pick up a document, place it on the scanner, press the button, repeat. 300 pages a night. Sometimes 400. But Paige had a habit no one told her to have. She read every single page before she scanned it. Not skimming, reading. The way a mechanic listens to an engine, searching for the sound that doesn't belong. She'd been doing this for 18 months. Every contract, every disclosure, every amendment. She kept notes in a yellow legal pad held together by a rubber band. She didn't know the legal terms for what she was finding, so she made up her own. Then one night, 3 weeks before everything changed, she picked up a stack of financial disclosures tied to the Atwood Industries deal. $200 million on the table, the biggest transaction Sterling and Hale had touched in a decade. She scanned the first document, normal. She scanned the second, and stopped. A defined term, qualified subsidiary, appeared in both documents. Same deal, same agreement, but the definition wasn't the same. In the first document, it included offshore entities. In the second, a later draft, that language was gone. Quietly removed. No red line, no tracked change, no revision note. Someone had changed the meaning of the deal without telling the client. Paige pulled a Post-it note from her bag, wrote 6 words. Definition mismatch. Qualified subsidiary. PG. She stuck it on the document and left it for the day shift attorneys. The next morning, the Post-it was gone. The document sat untouched. Nobody mentioned it. She told Hannah Perry, the legal secretary. Hannah sighed. Honey, they don't listen to us either. Just keep scanning. But Paige didn't keep scanning. She pulled out her yellow legal pad. She started mapping every instance of that term across 300 pages. And somewhere around 3:14 a.m., her hands began to shake. What had she found? And who had changed those documents? And why? Over the next 5 nights, Paige didn't scan a single document. She read, she cross-referenced, she mapped. Her yellow legal pad filled up, page after page of margin codes, colored tabs, arrows linking one clause to another. To anyone else, it looked like the scribbling of a madwoman. But it wasn't chaos. It was a system. One she'd invented herself because nobody had ever taught her the real one. And what that system revealed was ugly. 3 discrepancies. Not typos, not clerical errors. 3 deliberate manipulations buried inside 300 pages of dense legal language. The first, the definition swap. The term qualified subsidiary had been quietly redefined between drafts. In the original version, the one the client reviewed and approved, it included offshore entities. In the version sitting in the final binder, That language was gone, stripped out. No revision note, no red line, no record of the change. The effect? $120 million in offshore liabilities would transfer to Atwood Industries without Thomas Atwood ever knowing they existed. The second? The signature page mismatch. The page numbers on the execution copies didn't match the page numbers on the drafts the client had signed off on. Pages had been physically replaced after the client review, swapped in, stitched into the binding like they'd always been there. The third was the most dangerous. Page called it the dead end. Section 4.2b of the agreement referenced Section 9.1 for indemnification protections, the clause that would shield Atwood if anything went wrong after closing. But in the swapped version, Section 9.1 didn't exist anymore. It had been deleted. The cross-reference pointed to a ghost, which meant if Atwood signed, he'd have zero legal protection. And he'd never know until it was too late. Page laid all three findings across the basement table. Documents fanned out, legal pad open, tabs color-coded, pink for the definition swap, yellow for the page mismatch, green for the dead end. She didn't hear the footsteps behind her. Calvin Moore, senior paralegal, had come down at midnight for a filing box. He stood in the doorway for a full minute, watching. Page was bent over the table, pen moving fast, headphones on. She didn't notice him. He walked closer, picked up one of the flagged documents, read her margin note. His eyebrows went up. He picked up another, then another. "How long have you been doing this?" Page yanked off her headphones. "Doing what?" "Reading these. Actually reading them." "Since I started?" Calvin pulled up a chair, sat down across from her. "Show me." She showed him. No hesitation, no stumbling. She walked him through the definition swap, the page mismatch, the dead end, explaining concepts that first-year associates struggled with, using words she'd made up because no one had ever taught her the real ones. Calvin didn't interrupt. When she finished, he leaned back, crossed his arms, looked at the yellow legal pad, then at her. "Do you know how many attorneys on the 40th floor couldn't do what you just did?" Page didn't answer. Her hands were stained with highlighter ink, yellow, pink, green. She smelled like toner and old paper and industrial carpet cleaner. Her sneakers were silent on the tile floor. She was the opposite of everything the 40th floor represented, and she'd already outworked every person on it. Calvin told her straight, "You need to bring this upstairs, to the partners." Page shook her head. "They won't listen to me." "Then we make them listen." But what neither of them knew was this. The person who swapped those documents worked on the 40th floor. And he'd already noticed that someone had been pulling files after hours. The basement had a security camera, and Garrett Whitfield had just requested the footage. "Yo, pause. This girl taught herself to read contracts in a basement with zero training. Built her own system from scratch. No degree, no mentor, no nothing. And she's catching stuff that lawyers with six-figure salaries can't? Nah, that's insane." Paige Griffin grew up in the foster care system on Chicago's South Side. 5 homes in 12 years, 5 different beds, 5 different sets of rules that could change without warning. She learned something early. Adults don't listen to children who don't belong to anyone. By her 3rd home, she stopped talking. Not because she couldn't, because there was no point. Nobody asked what she thought. Nobody cared what she knew. So she went quiet. She watched instead. Read faces. Read tones. Read the fine print on the social worker documents that decided where she'd sleep next month. She got good at reading. Her last foster mother was different. Ruth Daniels was a retired postal worker who kept a clean house and read the newspaper cover to cover every morning. She didn't yell. She didn't make promises she couldn't keep. She just showed up. One evening, Ruth found 12-year-old Paige sitting at the kitchen table, reading her own foster care placement agreement. Not looking at it, reading it, word by word. Most adults would have said, "Put that away." Ruth pulled out a chair and said, "What does it say?" Paige told her, every clause, every condition, word for word. Ruth didn't blink. She went to the dollar store the next morning and came back with a yellow legal pad. She set it on the table in front of Paige. "If you're going to read everything, you might as well take notes." That legal pad changed Paige's life, not because it was special, because someone finally handed her a tool and said, "Your mind matters. Use it." Ruth told her one more thing, something Paige carried like a second heartbeat. "The paper never lies, baby. People lie. But the paper tells you exactly what they agreed to and exactly what they're trying to hide." Now, at 24, Paige lived alone in a studio on the South Side. She took the Blue Line to the Loop every night. She owned 3 pairs of scrubs, 1 interview outfit she'd never worn, and 14 yellow legal pads filled front to back with 18 months of notes. Notes from contracts she was never supposed to understand. She'd spent her whole life being invisible. But what happens when the invisible person is the only one who sees the truth? Calvin had a plan. A small one. Safe. "Don't go to the partners yet," he told Paige. "Start with Hannah Perry. She's a legal secretary. She's been here 15 years. If she believes you, she can get it in front of someone who matters." Paige agreed. The next afternoon, before her night shift, she sat across from Hannah in the break room on the 2nd floor. She opened her yellow legal pad. She laid out the 3 discrepancies: the definition swap, the page mismatch, the dead end. Hannah listened with her arms crossed. After 2 minutes, her arms dropped. After 4 minutes, her face had lost its color. "If this is real," Hannah started. She didn't finish. "It's real," Paige said. "I checked it 11 times. Hannah stared at the legal pad. Then she looked at Paige, the scrubs, the sneakers, the highlighter stains. She bit her lip. "I know someone, a mid-level associate, Craig Bellows. He's decent. Let me bring this to him." The next morning, Hannah walked into Craig Bellows' office with Paige's findings. Craig was young, polished, 3rd year out of law school. He listened for about 90 seconds. Then he stopped her. "Who found this?" "A document clerk, night shift." Craig leaned back. "Where did she go to law school?" "She didn't go to law school." "College?" "No." Craig closed his laptop. Slowly. The way you close a door on someone. "Hannah, I appreciate you bringing this in, but I'm not going to stake my reputation on the legal analysis of someone who isn't qualified to review a parking ticket. If there's an issue with the Atwood docs, the attorneys handling the deal will catch it." Meeting over. Hannah walked out with her jaw tight. She texted Calvin 2 words. He passed. But the damage didn't stop there. Craig mentioned it at lunch. Casually. The way people share things that amuse them. He was sitting across from Garrett Whitfield in the partners' dining room. "Funny story. Some night shift clerk thinks she found errors in the Atwood documents. Hannah Perry brought it to me like it was breaking news." Garrett's fork stopped mid-air. Just for a second. A fraction of a second, really. Then he laughed. "A night shift temp? She probably can't tell a contract from a cafeteria menu." Craig laughed, too. They moved on to talking about the Bulls game. But when Craig left, Garrett didn't laugh anymore. He picked up his phone, made one call, and by 6 o'clock that evening, the order was already in place. Paige arrived for her shift at 10 p.m. She swiped her badge at the document storage room. The reader beeped. Red light. Access denied. She swiped again. Same beep. Same red light. Her supervisor appeared behind her. New policy, Paige. Temps don't handle active case files anymore. You've been reassigned. Reassigned to what? Shredding. No explanation, no appeal, no conversation. Paige stood in the hallway. The shredding room hummed to her left. The elevator chimed softly to her right. 40 floors above, where the Atwood documents sat in a locked binder that she could no longer touch. She held her yellow legal pad against her chest, the rubber band dug into her palm. She had the proof. 3 weeks of nights, 14 pages of cross-references, every discrepancy mapped, flagged, and annotated in her own handwriting, and nobody would look at it. 72 hours. That's how long she had before the Atwood meeting. 72 hours before Thomas Atwood would sign documents that had been switched under his nose. She had the truth. She just had no way to get it into the room. Paige tried again. And again. And again. First, the anonymous ethics hotline. She sat on her apartment floor at 7 a.m., still in her scrubs, and typed out a detailed report on her phone. Every discrepancy, every document number, every page reference. She hit submit. The response came back in 4 seconds, automated. Thank you for your submission. Your concern has been logged. Expected response time, 10 to 15 business days. The Atwood meeting was in 2 days. Second attempt. She called Edward Hale's office directly. Edward Hale, founding partner, the man whose name was on the building. If anyone would care, it was him. His executive assistant picked up on the second ring. Polite, professional, ice cold. Mr. Hale doesn't take meetings with support staff. If you'd like to raise a concern, please submit a written request through your department head. Ma'am, this is urgent. There's a problem with the Atwood. I understand. Written request through your department head. Have a good day. Click. Third attempt. HR Paige walked into the Human Resources office during her lunch break. She brought her yellow legal pad. She laid out the 3 discrepancies, just like she'd done for Hannah, just like she'd done for Calvin. The HR manager smiled the whole time. When Paige finished, the woman folded her hands on the desk. We appreciate your diligence, Paige. We really do. But document review is handled by licensed attorneys. I'd encourage you to focus on your assigned duties. My assigned duties are shredding. Then I'd encourage you to focus on that. 3 attempts, 3 walls. Each one polite, each one absolute. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly the way it was built to work, to keep people like Paige on the outside. And while she was hitting walls, Garrett Whitfield was building new ones. That same afternoon, Garrett filed an internal request for a routine audit of temp staff access logs. He flagged Paige's after-hours document activity as a potential data security concern. A formal review was opened. If it went through, Paige would be terminated and permanently banned from the building before the Atwood meeting ever happened. He wasn't just ignoring the truth. He was making sure the truth couldn't walk through the door. 2 a.m. The 24-hour diner 2 blocks from Sterling and Hale. Paige sat in a corner booth with cold coffee and her yellow legal pad open to the first page. All the proof. Every discrepancy mapped. Every cross-reference is documented. 3 weeks of nights reduced to 14 pages of handwriting that no one in the building would read. She called Calvin. I tried everything, she said. Ethics hotline, Hale's office, HR. Nobody will look at it. Calvin was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I believe you, Paige, but I'm a paralegal. They don't listen to me either." Silence. The neon "Open" sign buzzed outside the window. A truck rumbled past. Then Calvin spoke again, slower this time. "There might be one way, but it's a risk." Meanwhile, 40 floors above that diner, Garrett Whitfield sat in his corner office. The Chicago skyline glowed behind him. He had the swapped documents open on his desk. He adjusted a clause, read it back, smiled. He poured himself a glass of scotch, leaned back in his leather chair. One person sat in a plastic booth trying to expose the truth. The other sat in a leather chair, perfecting the lie. And the clock kept ticking. Calvin said there was one way. But what could a paralegal and a temp clerk do against a senior attorney who had the power to fire them both? Calvin's plan was simple. Risky, but simple. The morning before the Atwood meeting, every binder had to go through a routine pre-meeting check. A paralegal-level task, assembling documents, verifying page counts, confirming everything was in order. Calvin was assigned to it. He couldn't get Paige into the room, but he could get her work in. The night before, he sat with Paige in the basement. She tore out 3 pages from her yellow legal pad. The 3 key annotations, one for each discrepancy. He photocopied them. Clean copies. Then he slipped them into the verification binder under the Paralegal Review tab, labeled as Flagged Discrepancy Notes. If anyone flipped to that tab, they'd see exactly what Paige had found. The definition swap, the page mismatch, the dead end. All 3, clear as daylight. Calvin carried the binder to the 40th floor at 8 a.m. His hands were steady. His heartbeat was not. He placed it on the mahogany conference table in the war room, right in the center. He positioned the flagged tab near the middle of the stack, where someone flipping through would naturally land on it. Then he stepped out and waited. At 9:30, Garrett Whitfield walked into the war room. Early. Alone. He said he was there to prep the room. Standard practice. Nobody questioned it. He opened the binder. Started flipping. Routine check. Page by page. Calvin watched from the hallway through the glass wall. Garrett reached the Paralegal Review tab. He stopped. His hand froze on the page. His jaw tightened. He read the first note. Then the second. Then the third. His face went cold. He looked over his shoulder. No one was watching, or so he thought. He pulled the 3 pages out, folded them once, slid them into his briefcase. Then he replaced the tab with blank separator pages, closed the binder, straightened his tie. Nobody would ever know those notes had been there. Calvin's stomach dropped. He stepped back from the glass, pulled out his phone, typed one word to Paige. Gone. But Calvin's binder wasn't the only path. Paige had tried her own way too. The night before, she'd written a 1-page summary. No legal jargon, no case numbers, just plain English. Here is what was changed. Here is what it means. Here is what happens if the client signs. She gave it to Thomas Atwood's driver, a man named Phil, who parked every morning in the same garage where Paige caught the blue line. They'd nodded at each other for months. He agreed to put the letter in Atwood's seat pocket. But that morning, Atwood's assistant cleaned the car before the pickup. She found the letter. Didn't recognize it. Tossed it into a trash can at a car wash on Michigan Avenue. It never reached Atwood. 2 paths to the truth. Both dead. The meeting started in 45 minutes. Garrett's fraud would go through. Atwood would sign. $120 million in hidden liabilities would become his problem. And nobody who knew the truth had access to that room. Paige sat in the diner. Calvin's text glowed on her phone screen. One word. Gone. Morning sunlight hit the window. The blue line rumbled underground somewhere beneath her feet. Her yellow legal pad sat on the table. 18 months of work that might die inside a briefcase. She stared at the phone. She stared at the pad. She stared at the door. Then Paige Griffin stood up. She left $6 on the counter. She walked out of the diner and turned toward the glass tower on the river. No badge, no appointment, no permission. But she had the truth, and she was done asking someone else to carry it. 9:50 a.m., Paige Griffin walked into the Sterling and Hale lobby. Scrubs, sneakers, highlighter-stained fingers, yellow legal pad under her arm. She looked like she hadn't slept. She hadn't. Earl, the security guard, looked up from his desk. He frowned. In 18 months, he had never seen Paige during the daytime. She was a ghost of the night shift. She didn't exist before sunset. Paige, you're not on the daytime access list. I need to get to the 40th floor, Earl. I can't let you up without authorization. You know that. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just stood there, hands at her sides, legal pad against her chest, looking at him the way someone looks at you when they've run out of every other option. Earl had known her for 18 months. She said hello every single night. She asked about his grandkids by name. She brought him coffee when the vending machine broke. He had never seen her look like this. He reached under the desk, buzzed the gate open. If anyone asks, I didn't see you. Paige stepped into the elevator, pressed 40. The doors closed. When they opened again, she stepped into a different world. Marble floors, glass walls, leather chairs that cost more than her rent. The air smelled like fresh coffee and expensive cologne. It was silent the way money is silent, heavy, controlled, deliberate. She had never been on this floor. Through the glass walls of the war room, she could see them. 10 people seated around a mahogany table that stretched the length of the room. Thomas Atwood at the head, silver hair, dark suit, reading glasses on. Garrett Whitfield standing at the far end, mid-presentation, pointing at a screen. Diane Collier beside him, nodding. Edward Hale seated near the window, listening with his arms crossed. The meeting had already started. A legal assistant stepped into Paige's path. Young, blonde, heels clicking on marble. Can I help you? The tone was polite. The meaning was not. It meant, you don't belong here. Paige didn't stop. She walked past her, straight toward the war room door. Through the glass, she could see Garrett holding the swapped documents, smiling, confident, 10 minutes away from getting everything he wanted. She pushed the door open. The heavy glass swung wide. Every sound in the room died. The hum of the air conditioning became the loudest thing in the building. 10 heads turned. 20 eyes landed on a girl in scrubs holding a coffee-stained legal pad. Garrett stopped mid-sentence. His mouth hung open. Diane Collier's pen slipped from her fingers. The legal assistant rushed in behind Paige, flustered, already apologizing. I'm so sorry, Mr. Hale. She just walked right past me. I don't know how she... Edward Hale raised one hand. The assistant stopped. The room stopped. Edward looked at Paige. Scrubs, sneakers, legal pad, highlighter under her fingernails. He had never spoken to this woman. He didn't know her name. He didn't know why she was here. But something in her face, the steadiness, the stillness, the absence of fear, made him say 5 words. Let her speak. Close the door. She was in the room, but would anyone believe what she was about to say? The door hit the wall before anyone knew what happened. Paige Griffin stood in the doorway of the war room. Scrubs, sneakers, yellow legal pad pressed against her chest. Her breathing was fast, but her eyes were steady. Every head in the room turned. Thomas Atwood lowered his reading glasses. Victor Stanton set down his pen. Diane Collier's coffee cup froze halfway to her mouth. Two junior associates looked at each other, confused. Garrett Whitfield stopped mid-sentence. His pointer was still touching the screen. His mouth was still open. For 1 full second, he didn't move. Then his face shifted. Confusion, contempt, and then, just for a flash, fear. Who the hell? Paige didn't wait for him to finish. I saw them swap the papers. Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't a scream. It was clear and steady, and it shook only once on the word saw. The room went dead silent. The legal assistant rushed in behind her, heels clicking fast on the marble. Mr. Hale, I'm so sorry. She just walked right past me. I tried to... Edward Hale raised one hand. The assistant stopped. The room stopped. Garrett recovered fast. He was a trial lawyer. He knew how to control a room. He straightened his jacket and turned to Atwood with the calm smile of a man who had practiced calm smiles in the mirror. Mr. Atwood, I sincerely apologize for this disruption. This woman is a temporary employee. Night shift. She scans documents and shreds paper. She has no legal training, no authorization to review case files, and frankly, he looked at Paige the way he'd looked at her in the basement. No business being on this floor. He reached for his phone. I'll have security remove her. Don't. One word. From the head of the table. Thomas Atwood wasn't looking at Garrett. He was looking at Paige. At her scrubs. At her highlighter-stained fingers. At the yellow legal pad she held like it was the only thing keeping her standing. Thomas Atwood had built a 58-year career on one skill. Not finance, not strategy. Reading people. And right now, he was reading Paige Griffin. She said she saw something. I want to hear what it is. Garrett's smile cracked. Just a fraction. Mr. Atwood, with all due respect, she's a scanner. She's not qualified to. I didn't ask for her resume. I asked to hear what she has to say. Edward Hale nodded once, quietly. He looked at Paige and said, Go ahead. Paige stepped forward. She had no laptop, no slides, no laser pointer. She had a yellow legal pad held together by a rubber band, filled with 18 months of handwriting. She opened it, and she spoke. Not in legal jargon, not in formal language, in plain English. The kind of English that doesn't need a degree to understand, and doesn't need one to be devastating. Mr. Atwood, the documents in front of you are not the same documents your legal team reviewed 6 weeks ago. 3 changes were made after your review, without your knowledge, without your consent. She looked straight at Atwood, not at Garrett, not at Edward, at the man who was about to sign. First, the term qualified subsidiary was redefined between drafts. In the version you approved, it included offshore entities. In the version in front of you right now, that language has been removed. The effect? $120 million in offshore liabilities will transfer to you. And you will not know they exist until it's too late. She turned a page on her legal pad. Second, the page numbers on your execution copies don't match the page numbers on the drafts you reviewed. Pages were physically removed and replaced after your sign-off. The binding was restitched to hide the swap. She turned another page. Third, Section 4.2b of this agreement references Section 9.1 for your indemnification protections. the clause that protects you if anything goes wrong after closing. But in the version in front of you, Section 9.1 has been deleted. The reference points to nothing. If you sign this, you will have zero legal protection and no way to recover. She spoke for 4 minutes. No pause, no stumble. Every sentence landed like a stone dropped into still water. The room was silent. Victor Stanton, opposing counsel, had gone white. He didn't know about the swap either. Garrett had acted alone, and now both sides were compromised. Diane Collier pushed her chair back from the table, slowly, physically distancing herself from Garrett. The junior associates stared at their hands. Thomas Atwood turned to Garrett. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Is this true?" Garrett straightened his tie. The smile was gone now. "Mr. Atwood, this is a temporary employee with no legal training who has clearly overstepped her—" Garrett. One word from Edward Hale. Quiet. Final. The way a father says a child's name when the lie has already been told and there is nothing left to hide behind. Garrett stopped talking. And then Paige leaned forward, just slightly, toward Atwood. And she said it, not in a shout, not in a speech, but in the quiet voice of someone who has spent her whole life not being heard. Tuesday night, 41st floor printer room, 11:48 p.m. I was emptying the recycling bins. She paused. The whole room held its breath. I saw him print the new pages. I saw him pull the originals from the binding. I saw him switch them. And I saw him feed the originals into the shredder. Time, floor, room, action, detail. She was there. She saw it. And she remembered. Because that's what Paige Griffin does. She reads. She remembers. She tells the truth. Garrett Whitfield's face was the color of ash. His hands were flat on the table. He didn't move. Thomas Atwood stood, slowly. He closed the unsigned documents. The sound was soft, a quiet, expensive thwap that echoed in the silence like a verdict. He looked at Edward Hale. "I'd like your firm to conduct an internal investigation. I'd like full transparency. And I'd like her involved." He pointed at Paige. Garrett picked up his briefcase. He walked toward the door. Nobody stopped him. Nobody needed to. Diane Collier stayed in her seat. She did not follow. The clock on the wall read 10:22 a.m. 22 minutes. That's all it took. 22 minutes to undo 3 weeks of fraud. And it started with a girl in scrubs who pushed open a door that no one had invited her through. The war room emptied slowly. Atwood left with his attorneys. Victor Stanton left without a word. Diane Collier gathered her things with shaking hands and walked out with her eyes on the floor. The junior associates followed like ghosts. One by one, the leather chairs emptied. The coffee cups sat abandoned. The unsigned documents lay closed on the table. Until only 2 people remained. Edward Hale and Paige Griffin. She was still standing, still holding her yellow legal pad. Her hands were trembling now, not from fear, but from the adrenaline draining out of her body like water through a crack. The fight was over, and her body was finally catching up. Edward looked at her. "Sit down." She sat, for the first time in her life, in a leather chair at a mahogany conference table on the 40th floor of a building where she had only ever known the basement. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The city hummed 40 floors below. The air conditioning ticked softly. Sunlight came through the east-facing windows and warmed the carpet between them. On the credenza behind Edward, there was a framed photograph, old, slightly faded. A young man in a cheap suit standing outside a small storefront. The sign above the door read, West Side Legal Aid Clinic. Paige noticed it. Edward noticed her noticing.
"That's me," he said. 30 years ago. My first job out of law school. Free legal clinic on the West Side, rats in the ceiling, one phone line. My first client was a single mother who lost her apartment because she didn't understand the fine print on her lease. He paused, looked at the photograph, then back at Paige. "You remind me of why I went to law school in the first place." Paige didn't cry. She didn't thank him. She sat very still in that leather chair, her legal pad on the table in front of her, and she said quietly, "My foster mother always said, the paper never lies, baby. People lie. But the paper tells you exactly what they agreed to and exactly what they're trying to hide." Edward looked at her for a long time, the kind of look that has nothing to do with resumes or degrees or what floor you work on. Your foster mother was a smart woman. That was it. That was the whole scene. No audience, no cameras, no applause. Just two people, separated by age, race, money, power, education, and everything the world uses to sort humans into categories, recognizing each other. Someone brought in 2 cups of coffee. Paige wrapped her hands around hers. It was the first time she'd ever drunk from a real ceramic mug at Sterling and Hale. It was warm. Within 48 hours, Garrett Whitfield ceased to exist at Sterling and Hale. Administrative leave. Pending investigation. His office was locked. His nameplate was removed from the partner trackboard in the main lobby. Pulled out quietly, like a tooth. The state bar was notified. No handcuffs, no dramatic arrest. Just a man who had been on the fast track to partner, suddenly erased from the firm's future as if he had never been there. Diane Collier cooperated. She gave the investigators everything. Emails, meeting notes, the pressure Garrett had put on her to overlook discrepancies. She was placed on probation, not fired. A measured consequence for someone who had followed, not led. The system that had protected Garrett for years was the same system that removed him. Quietly, permanently, without ceremony. But the Atwood deal, the $200 million transaction that Garrett had tried to corrupt, was not dead. Edward Hale took it over personally. He assembled a clean team, new attorneys, no one connected to Garrett. The original, unaltered documents were retrieved from the firm's version control archive. The real versions, the ones the client had actually reviewed and approved 6 weeks earlier. Then Edward did something no one expected. He asked Paige to join the review. Not as a scanner, not as a temp, as the person who would cross-check every single page of the restored documents against her yellow legal pad notes. The same notes that no one in the building had wanted to read 3 weeks ago. Paige worked for 2 straight days. She barely slept. She sat in the review room on the 40th floor, a room she had never been allowed to enter, with her legal pad open and a stack of restored documents in front of her. Page by page, clause by clause, cross-reference by cross-reference. She found 4 minor clerical errors that the clean team had missed. Small things. A mismatched date, a misnumbered exhibit, a formatting inconsistency in a warranty clause. Nothing fraudulent, just human mistakes. The kind of mistakes that happen when people are rushing to fix a crisis. She flagged all 4, and on every page she verified, she wrote 2 letters in the bottom corner. P.G. The same initials from the Post-it note that had been thrown away. When the new signing meeting took place, the war room looked different. Same table, same leather chairs, same view of the Chicago River. But this time, there was an extra chair and a small nameplate in front of it. Thomas Atwood walked in. He scanned the room. He saw Edward Hale. He saw the new legal team. And he saw Paige Griffin, seated at the table, legal pad open, pen in hand. He didn't hesitate. He sat down, picked up his pen, and said 3 words. "Now, I'll sign." He signed. Every page. The deal closed. $200 million. Clean, verified, protected. The truth didn't kill the deal. The truth saved it. And the girl they told to stop reading was the reason it survived. 1 week later, a letter arrived at Sterling and Hale, hand-delivered, on Thomas Atwood's personal stationery. It wasn't about the fraud. It wasn't about the investigation. It was about Paige. In 58 years, I've sat across from hundreds of lawyers. I've never seen anyone read a contract the way she does. She doesn't just read the words. She hears what they're trying not to say. The letter was read aloud at a partners' meeting. Every senior attorney in the firm heard it. Paige was not in the room, but Calvin Moore was, and his eyes were wet. 2 days after the letter, Edward Hale called Paige into his office. He slid a document across the desk. An offer letter. Position: Document Intelligence Analyst. A role that had never existed before. Created from nothing. Designed for exactly one person. Full-time. Benefits: a desk on the 40th floor. And the firm would sponsor her education. Paralegal certification first, then a pathway to whatever she wanted after that. The salary line read $68,000 a year, 4 times what she'd made as a temp. Enough to change everything. Paige read the offer letter twice, the way she reads everything, word by word. On her first day in the new role, she arrived on the 40th floor carrying one item: her yellow legal pad. The same one, beaten, coffee-stained, rubber band holding it together. Her desk had a small brass plate on the front edge. It read, Paige Griffin, Document Intelligence Analyst. But the detail that broke her, and will break you, was behind the desk. Hanging on the wall, in a simple black frame, was Paige's original Post-it note. The one from 3 weeks ago. The one she had stuck on the Atwood document in the basement. The one that had been pulled off and thrown away like it meant nothing. Edward Hale had found it. In the shredding pile. He'd had it mounted and framed. It read, in Paige's handwriting, Definition mismatch. Qualified subsidiary. See 2.1c versus 9.1a. Doesn't match. PG. 15 words. The first 15 words that changed everything. Edward walked into her office that morning. He picked up her yellow legal pad, the one Ruth Daniels had started with a dollar store purchase 12 years ago. He carried it to the war room. He placed it on the mahogany conference table, right next to his own leather portfolio. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The gesture said it all. Her work belonged there. In the weeks that followed, something shifted at Sterling and Hale. Quietly. From the bottom up. 3 paralegals and clerks came to Paige with documents they had flagged but had been too afraid to raise. She reviewed each one. 2 were legitimate concerns. The firm acted on both. Hannah Perry sent her a card. It said, "You made us all a little braver." Thomas Atwood's company established the Griffin Daniels Scholarship, a fund for first-generation legal professionals in Chicago, named for Paige and for Ruth. Earl the security guard the man who had buzzed Paige through that morning, received a commendation letter from Edward Hale. It said, "Good judgment matters more than good protocol." And one afternoon, there was a knock on Paige's office door. Calvin Moore. Carrying a coffee, he set it on her desk. He looked at the framed post-it note on the wall. He looked at the brass nameplate. He stood there for a moment, his hand still on the mug. Then he said, quietly, "Ruth would have loved this." Paige nodded. She couldn't speak. She didn't need to. 1 year later, Paige Griffin still takes the blue line. She still arrives before anyone else. She still walks through the Sterling and Hale lobby when the marble floor is quiet and the elevators are empty. Some habits don't change. Some habits are the reason you survive. But everything else is different. Earl says her name when she walks in. Not a nod. Her name. "Morning, Paige." She says his back. Every single day. Her badge works on every door in the building. Every floor. Every room. Including the war room. She completed her paralegal certification 6 months ago. Top of her class. She's now enrolled in a pre-law program. Evening classes, 3 nights a week, after full days on the 40th floor. She still uses a yellow legal pad. Number 15 now. The first 14 are stored in a box under her desk. She keeps them the way some people keep journals. They are the record of who she became when nobody was watching. The Griffin Daniels Scholarship funded 3 students in its first year. 2 of them are former foster children. One of them, a 19-year-old girl from the South Side, sent Paige a letter. It said, "I didn't know people like us were allowed to be in rooms like that." Paige wrote back one line. "We always were. We just needed someone to leave the door open." That letter sits in a frame on Paige's desk now, right next to the post-it note. 2 pieces of paper. One that was thrown away, one that found its way home. There's a detail I didn't mention earlier. On the morning Paige burst into that meeting, she passed a young woman in the hallway on the 40th floor. A junior clerk, new hire. The girl was carrying a stack of binders, head down, trying not to be noticed. Paige stopped, just for a second. She looked at the girl and said, "Read every page." The girl looked up, confused. Paige was already walking toward the war room door. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. Someday, that girl would understand. Not tomorrow. Not next week. The next time you're in a meeting, or a classroom, or a waiting room, look at the person nobody's looking at. The one refilling the coffee. The one pushing the mail cart. The one in scrubs who just walked through a door she wasn't supposed to open. Ask them what they think. You might be surprised. You might be changed. If this story made you feel something, if you saw yourself in Paige, or in Calvin, or in that diner at 2 a.m. with cold coffee and a truth nobody wanted to hear, leave a comment. Tell me about the time you knew something was real and nobody would listen. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you're in a position to hire, to mentor, to sponsor, think about creating a door. Not a charity, a door. A real pathway for someone who has the talent but not the transcript. Because brilliance doesn't come with a degree. Sometimes it comes with a yellow legal pad and a night shift. Look, I'm not going to lie. This story messed me up. Everybody in that building had a degree, had a title, had a voice, and not one of them said a word. The girl who scans paper for a living? She's the one who stood up. That's crazy to me. There's a moment early in this story, a post-it note that got thrown away. Go back and find it. It hits different now. Sometimes brilliance comes in scrubs. Sometimes it knocks. And sometimes, when no one will open, it kicks the door down. The paper never lies. And neither did she.